Nazar hurried through the rain-soaked streets, urgency driving him forward. Drenched and desperate, he clutched his neighbor's arm, adrenaline surging as they raced to the garage. The promise of safety loomed ahead, but looming shadows whispered of chaos. Unbeknownst to them, fate's tide was shifting, threatening everything they cherished. The paddles plunged into the water, creating a cascade of droplets as they emerged. It was a dreamlike sight as the boat drifted along a familiar city street. Nazar grasped the reality of the situation, yet marveled at his surroundings. There was the bakery where he bought bread after his daily task, and the bustling cigar shop now partially immersed in water. No one had anticipated the flood until it was too late. Just the morning prior, the sun had been radiant, with no signs of the impending calamity. Nazar had left his home at his usual pace that morning, exchanged pleasantries with his neighbors, and set off to his beloved cafe. He had been a regular patron every morning for the past year since the cafe opened, making it an essential part of his daily routine. The coffee was scrumptious, and these visits turned into a comforting morning ritual, not for him, but for a sassy cat with a whiskered face. A few days after the cafe's inauguration, a stray cat began dropping by. A common black and white feline, nothing extraordinary about its appearance. It blended seamlessly amidst the pots of flowers and wooden tables on the outdoor patio. Guests were genuinely charmed by the little furball and welcomed it. The cat would occasionally claim a seat, and nobody had the heart to disrupt its tranquility. Those rare moments when it leapt onto a guest's lap were seen as a joyous event, quickly leading to its local fame. A water bowl was even placed among the flower pots for it. No one had any idea where the cat resided or where it went at night, but come morning, it was already at its standby. The cafe served cookies, cakes, puff pastries, and ham croissants as breakfast items. Nazar made sure to stop by soon after it opened, purchasing a croissant and a cup of coffee, then stepping outside to divide his breakfast with the cat. He enjoyed his coffee and pastry while offering the remaining portion to the charismatic creature, which showed no reservations in expecting its share. Its demanding meows, affectionate rubs against his legs, and pleading look made it impossible to resist. Nazar didn't even attempt to resist. Soon the two formed a close bond, becoming the best of friends. Before Nazar even reached the cafe, the welcoming sound of a purring cat could be heard. He enjoyed the company of his furry friend, who waited at the entrance every morning. After finishing breakfast, he would lightly touch the cat's head and head to work. The cat reciprocated this ritual by jumping onto a nearby chair, giving a pleasant look, and then patiently waiting for the next visitor to share food. That day started like any other. Nazar showed affection towards the cat, smiled, and went to the office with a positive outlook. However, as he moved towards the office entrance, a burst of cold wind gushed against him. He raised his head toward the sky. The sun was quickly swallowed by dark clouds. He barely settled at his desk when the first droplets of rain began hitting the window pane. What started as a light shower soon transformed into a heavy downpour, drenching the flower beds. The sidewalks and streets turned into small streams. Nazar's thoughts unintentionally went to his feline friend, and he hoped it had found shelter. As lunch neared, the rain intensified. Trees swayed to the howling winds, and rainwater reached car doorsteps. Everyone in the office started worrying about getting home. Initially, the boss ignored the complaints, but when he saw the water level reaching his beloved BMW, he had a change of heart. He let everyone leave early, promising to work over the weekend. Nazar rushed out first. Some colleagues tried calling taxi services, but all operators seemed busy. A few others tried their luck at the bus stop, which looked bleak because Nazar could not spot any buses on the roads. Nazar preferred walking to work. As he started his walk home and reached the office porch, he realized it was not going to be a comfortable journey. The rainwater had reached the second step, and there were no signs of it slowing down. He didn't want to ruin his new shoes and hesitated to remove them. Deciding to brave the waters, he put his foot forward, instantly soaking his shoes and making his trousers stick unpleasantly to his calves. Cold water drenched him from a hose, and his wet hair stuck to his forehead. With amusement, Nazar spat out some water, attempting to dry himself. Stumbling across uneven pavement, he accidentally thumped his toe against the edge of the curb, shrouded in a grimy puddle. He grumbled under his breath, and once he arrived at his favorite coffee house, the outdoor seating had been removed for the day. Planter pots were placed on the window ledges, and nestled snugly among them was the neighborhood cat, staring condescendingly at the rainy landscape. The cat had cozied up where the overhang shielded it from the downpour, the large ceramic plant pot providing refuge from gusty winds. With the cat's carefree lounging, it was apparent that it was undisturbed by the rain, unlike Nazar. When he extended a hand to stroke the cat, it sidestepped his touch, gazing questioningly at his wet fingertips before flicking its paw defiantly. A soft chuckle escaped Nazar's lips. He raised his hands in surrender and retreated. Taking a final look at the closed coffee joint, he expedited his journey home. Awaiting him at the front entrance was his older neighbor. Their 30-year age gap didn't hinder their friendly rapport, but at that moment, confrontation was the last thing on Nazar's mind. Drenched from head to toe, all he yearned for was a hot shower. Unfortunately, his appearance didn't intimate this desire to his neighbor. "Quite a downpour today, wouldn't you say?" the neighbor cheerfully commented. "A bit more rain, and our streets will be suitable for a boating adventure. I've got a boat stored in the garage if you're game. It's been ages since I last went fishing." "That sounds delightful, Alexander Leonidovich, but I'm a bit under the weather. Can we chat another time?" responded Nazar. "Absolutely, no worries," agreed the friendly neighbor. "I just wanted to point out the intensity of the rain. Stay safe. Our dam hasn't been reinforced for quite some time. It's not as durable as it was 70 years ago." Acknowledging his neighbor's concern with a nod, Nazar cut the conversation short, waved goodbye, and hastily climbed the stairs, yearning for warmth. Feeling rejuvenated after his shower, Nazar slipped into comfy loungewear, prepared a hot cup of tea, and snuggled under a cozy blanket. Finally, he began to feel warm. Gazing out the window, the rainfall seemed relentless. Several tedious hours remained until the workday's conclusion, and Nazar couldn't decide how to pass the time. Sure, there was a pile of housework to tackle, but he was in no mood to begin any of it. Suddenly, an idea hit Nazar like a lightning bolt. He decided to pay his neighbor, Alexander Leonidovich, a visit. Alexander was thrilled by Nazar's unexpected visit. Without delay, he set the table, served his guest, and began sharing stories. The retiree had previously worked in the water department, so he understood the city's drainage issues and wasn't startled by the inundated streets and pavements. His real concern was a potential dam failure upriver. Even though their city was located on elevated land, they would not be immune to flooding. Nazar thought the protective structure was safe. It was built to be robust. The dam on their river was also relatively small. However, Alexander Leonidovich had a different perspective. He recalled his visit to the dam years earlier during his service, where the structure's age and deterioration were apparent. The lead engineer had cautioned about its potential collapse. Nothing had changed since, according to the retired man, which was why the current heavy rain alarmed him. Nazar did his best to reassure the old man, but his words echoed in his head once he got home. Scenes from catastrophe movies haunted his imagination. Eventually, he managed to divert his thoughts elsewhere and peacefully fell asleep, only to be jolted awake in the middle of the night by loud banging on the door. Startled and groggy, Nazar stumbled into the corridor and opened the door to an animated Alexander Leonidovich waving his arms. "It's now! The dam has burst!" "What's going on? What has burst?" Nazar didn't understand. "The dam! Everything's going to be flooded soon. We need to get the boat ready. Come on!" Alexander Leonidovich gripped Nazar's hand, yanking him out. The urgency was so high that Nazar promptly snapped out of his grogginess. He gripped the doorframe, reluctant to leave in the ungodly hours of the night. Despite his reluctance, Nazar stepped out onto the landing. Alexander Leonidovich had contacted an old associate after Nazar had left. The engineer, on shift, had witnessed the dam give way from his office. The downpour had caused a surge in river levels, leading to a leak in the dam. Luckily, the rupture was high enough to prevent a severe city flood, but it was far from dry. The engineer alerted all necessary institutions, but Alexander Leonidovich preferred to be over-prepared rather than under-prepared, hence his request for help with the boat. "I just need to lift it off the carrier in the garage," the senior citizen lamented. "Typically, I go fishing with my pals. Unloading it together is easier, but alone, it's too much for me. Nazar understood it was simpler to help his neighbor than to explain why he couldn't. With a tired exhalation, he tucked into a jacket, exchanged his slip-ons for tennis shoes, and started the descent. An arm's length down, he observed his neighbor's tall rubber boots. In irritation, Nazar slapped his forehead and returned to grab the most water-resistant boots he could find. They wouldn't shield him from the river, but provided a sense of assurance. The water in the yard hadn't surged, and the rain had abated at least. The streetlights were out, so Alexander Leonidovich lit the path with a flashlight. He could have navigated to the garage with his eyes shut, but opted for caution. The padlock yielded without a hitch, but the door resisted opening. Water met their efforts with opposition. Nazar sprang into action, but their two-man effort didn't prevail. The man traipsed alongside the gate, exploring with his foot until he hit an obstruction. Most likely it was a piece of timber from the neighbor's flower patch. The deluge swept it away, and the snag hit the garage, barricading the entrance. Nazar nearly submerged into the murky sludge to retrieve the obstruction and redirect it back to the flower patch. From that point forward, the atmosphere improved. The doors grudgingly gave in. Inside the quasi-submerged garage was a carrier with a reasonably current motorboat. Nazar and the neighbor guided it directly into the water. The motor remained untouched, which didn't hinder their maneuvers. Alexander Leonidovich speedily draped a piece of fabric over it and blanketed the bottom with paddles. While Nazar steadied the boat, the senior promptly fastened the cover, sheltering it from the weather. They then toiled to shut the garage. "Why in the dead of night?" Nazar finally queried. Drenched from the water and rain, he had managed to rouse and was eager for conversation. "By sunrise, the water from the barrier will reach here. We wouldn't stand a chance getting the boat out. You have my gratitude. Get some rest. I'll keep watch to avert theft." Nazar intended to inquire further, but the prospect of a pillow seemed more enticing than a dialogue in the rain. The neighbor tethered the boat to the overhead support, ascended the steps, and settled onto an extendable chair by the entrance. It was only then that Nazar spied a couple of newspapers and a thermos. Clearly, the retiree had planned everything out. Chuckling to himself, Nazar decided to catch up on some much-needed rest before a new working day ahead. The morning didn't start on a good note. Although sunshine reigned supreme, the view from Nazar's window was far from sunny. The backyards were obscured by grim, murky water, submerging benches, and rising to the windows of nearby parked cars. Swiftly, Nazar withdrew from the window, switched on the television, and tuned into the news where he saw aerial views of his city waterlogged. Certain areas were slightly better off, like their building on elevated land. However, the low-lying regions were not as lucky. Entire blocks of homes were nearly inundated, and people were fleeing via helicopters. Proving himself correct once again was the wise Alexander Leonidovich. Nazar quickly got ready and dashed out, only to be shocked to find his neighbor bringing a drenched dog into his flat. Nazar was absolutely certain that Alexander Leonidovich did not have pets. He had just visited him the previous day, and there had been no dogs there. "Ah, Nazar, perfect timing," the retiree beamed. "Care to join me? I'm gradually rescuing anyone I can from the waters. The flooding has affected not just people. Dogs and cats are suffering too. I've secured about a dozen just this morning. I'm currently sheltering them at my place to avoid alarming the neighbors. As soon as the water levels drop, they'll be on their way. The rescue needs are much greater in the submerged houses. Any help will be beneficial," Alexander Leonidovich expressed, silencing his discontent. There was a real hero. By nightfall, droves of professional rescuers had landed in the city, actively assisting the waterlogged neighborhoods with boats and helicopters. Ordinary people might not only fail to help, but might even hinder the effort. Therefore, it made sense to make themselves useful where it was genuinely required. Cats and dogs were living beings too. Who were they to determine their fate? As he continued toward the stairwell, Nazar felt awkward. He realized he had spoken inconsiderately. Animals and humans were equally deserving of life. The realization dawned upon him that he had a good rapport with animals. Consider the story of the cat from the local cafe. Its relationship with Nazar had developed into a beloved friendship. Then, like a punch in the gut, it occurred to him about the cat. The cafe had left it on the windowsill just the day before. With the water levels significantly risen overnight, and considering the low height of the windowsills, the creature likely couldn't escape by itself. "Hang on!" Nazar yelled to his fellow townsmen before rapidly descending the stairs. The water had begun to creep in, but the high foundation prevented a complete flood, merely making everything soggy. There was a boat bobbing nearby, tied to the entrance, with Alexander Leonidovich perched inside. "I'm joining you, but first we need to check on the cafe about 3 blocks away," he proposed. The older man offered no argument. Due to concerns about catching something or someone, the single motor wasn't installed. Therefore, they relied on human rowing. By the time they arrived at their destination, they had already rescued 2 tree-stranded cats and found a dog that had somehow scaled a transformer box and managed to stay unscathed. Nazar felt like he was in a city parallel to his own, identical in appearance, yet eerily unfamiliar. He gazed in bewilderment at the once familiar streets he traversed daily. As the boat neared the cafe, his anticipation of finding the cat safe and sound grew. The establishments along the street were built on slightly raised land, providing some relief from extensive water damage. But his spirits plummeted when the cafe came into view. The low windowsills were fully submerged, with only a few woefully undersized plant branches visible above the waterline. There was no sign of the cat near the cafe. Despite scoping out the surroundings and trying to coax it out, Nazar's efforts bore no fruit. Alexander Leonidovich gently placed a hand on Nazar's shoulder in silent solidarity, suggesting they press onward. While they couldn't rescue the cafe's cat, numerous other animals were desperately in need of help. Although saddened, Nazar nodded in agreement and gently steered the boat away. Arriving at a house, Nazar spotted an animal by a vehicle and immediately angled the boat in its direction. A few seconds later, he felt a gut instinct that the cat bore a striking resemblance to their cafe friend. He began to paddle harder. The cat had somehow held onto the door handle of the larger car, seemingly for a considerable duration. Its once assertive, noisy meow had vanished. Dehydrated and exhausted, it could only manage to let out soft, forlorn cries. Nazar glided in close proximity, extended his hands, and hoisted the animal from under its limbs. The feline failed to grasp the situation. In an effort to hold on to the car's handle, it froze and did not budge, scared of falling back into the water. As they lured it away from the only safety it knew, the creature began wrestling. With all its limbs, it attempted to latch onto the car, but its claws slipped off the polished surface. Nazar briskly lowered the creature into the boat. The completely drenched cat lost all its radiance. It no longer held an air of arrogance or valor. The animal's terror was almost tangible. Nazar decided to provisionally take the animal home. Upon arrival, he first took the cat to his living area, dried it off with a soft cloth, and placed it in front of a plate of sausage in the kitchen. The creature didn't show interest in the food, but he assumed the appetizing aroma would ease the tension. Leaving the cat indoors, he returned to assist his neighbor. Together, they made additional trips, saving various animals, and even helped a lady who worked late hours return home safely. Eventually, Alexander Leonidovich's living space transformed into a massive war zone. Cats claimed the cupboards, shelves, and couch backs. Dogs took over the floors. Terrified animals lunged at each other, barking, screaming, snarling, and lashing claws. The retiree himself wasn't thrilled about the chaotic situation, but understood these animals had no other refuge from the deluge. As a helping hand to his neighbor, Nazar contacted all shelters and animal welfare groups in neighboring areas unaffected by the water. Fortunately, their efforts paid off. Animal lovers arrived in a bus filled with comfortable carriers. Alexander Leonidovich and Nazar diligently transferred the animals until darkness fell. The retiree only kept his dog, a long-term resident of their property and the most peaceful of the cats. "I'll have someone to converse with," he joyfully expressed. Nazar returned home past sunset. He switched on the lights but couldn't locate the cat in the kitchen. The sausage was consumed, which he was pleased about. The feline was discovered in the bedroom, tucked under the bed, its frightened eyes reflecting the light. Nazar tried to comfort the pet, but his attempts fell on deaf ears. He let the cat be, hoping it would feel better by daybreak and come out willingly. Nazar was indeed accurate. When he arose to brew his morning cup of coffee, the creature was already in the kitchen, curiously exploring the beverage's aroma. The man had no pastries on hand, but the cat seemed unperturbed. It happily devoured anything offered. The floodwater subsided slowly. Only after 3 days could people move around without getting soaked up to their hips. In the lower areas of their homes, the water lingered for over a week. As normality began to return and the local cafe reopened, Nazar contemplated returning the cat to its former haunt. Not that he was bothered by the feline's company, he just felt he should respect the creature's liberty. One morning, upon finding the cat near the coffee machine, Nazar voiced his intentions to the creature. Yet as he prepared for work and glanced into the kitchen, the cat had seemingly vanished. A thorough search of the apartment was needed to locate the animal. Eventually, the feline was discovered hiding beneath the bed. But when Nazar tried to escort the creature outdoors, it began vehemently resisting, unleashing a loud outcry and lashing out with its claws. "It appears he's not ready to depart," noted Alexander Leonidovich, who had mysteriously appeared. "Do you want to assign a name to him?" "I suppose it's about time," Nazar chuckled. Releasing the cat, it promptly trotted back to its cherished spot in the kitchen, nestled next to the coffee beans, harboring a grudge. It appeared the feline was less a cafe aficionado and more a devotee of the coffee aroma. And that was something it could relish at home too.